I think the best thing about undertaking reviews and meta-analyses in general are that personally, each one of them that I've been involved in has resulted in me learning some things about how I work and also how I work in a team. And each one of them is a venture which ultimately, well, the main aim of them is to disseminate your knowledge and findings and ultimately improve patient care and practice.
Well, I'll start by saying I've learnt a huge amount about the subject, and for a brief period of time I was the expert in this one very, very small, narrow piece of anaesthetic literature, and that was exciting. I got to meet some really, really interesting people, and it gave me an insight into academic anaesthesia that I'd never had before.
Best bit, in my experience, has been collaborating with some of the big names out there on some important projects. My work was looking at Ristors for emergency laparotomies. So it was a big, important question clinically that we could use for the NELA dataset. And I got to pick the brains of some very smart people.
I think the best parts of, especially the meta-analysis, is when it all came together at the end. So having spent time thinking of a question and putting all the work in, that first moment when you program all the extracted data into the software and you get your first forest plots, which then show essentially whether your question has been answered, is quite an enjoyable moment to see whether the work you've done is true or not.
Well, looking back now at the experience I had in the last 2 years carrying out this meta-analysis, the best bits that I can think about is actually the final result, being able to publish it in a well-known journal like BJA. So it's a real accomplishment for me with all the efforts I put into it. Also, is thinking about it is pushing the boundaries. I thought I kind of knew how to do a meta-analysis from reading other meta-analysis, obviously, but really when getting down to the nitty-gritty of actually carrying out a project like this, I really didn't know very much, and coming out of it, obviously understanding a little bit more when I read somebody else's work, I appreciate way more because of the effort that I know that's involved in the background leading towards it. So pushing myself out of boundaries that I'm used to.
The best bits, I think, of undertaking a systematic review are really becoming a subject matter expert on your area of research. You really have to familiarise yourself with all the literature by definition, and that's quite a nice feeling to build that knowledge and to really develop your expertise and become that subject matter expert.
So this is an easy one. The worst bit for me was the snowballing. So once you feel like you got there, you found some articles and some references that are of interest, you then have to turn to the back, look at the references, start all over again.
I think there's lots of new material. For someone like myself who's never done a systematic review prior to the one I did, there are lots of new things to learn. So whereas things like the meta-analysis and forest plots I found quite intuitive, there are lots of other complicated aspects to learn, such as how to report on bias, what funnel plots are, what heterogeneity is, things like that, which I found quite difficult. As well as that, the literature search is difficult as well for me. So having not done any proper Medline style literature searches since medical school, it was all a bit new, but luckily we had some help from librarians, and often they're quite helpful to come up with a schema for doing a literature review.
So the systematic review that I was involved with was a Cochrane systematic review, and that has pros and cons. I would say that doing it the Cochrane way was a fantastic experience in terms of the rigorousness of it. However, they are very focused on attention to detail, and I'm tempted to use the word pernickety, but the very, very minor points that they picked up on and maybe I had to revise made it quite dispiriting, and it did tail on quite a lot towards the end. The other part of it I found most difficult, I guess, was having done my searches and being left with nearly 100,000 references and going through each one took me a fairly difficult week with quite a lot of coffee in a darkened room.
There was a lot of bits that those up and downs with running or carrying out meta-analysis in my experience. One of the worst bits that stands out to me would be rushing into it, actually. I think that was the problem I had. I thought I knew what I was doing and trying to do it very quickly without realizing you really have to sit down and plan things and really talk to other people that have done meta-analysis and trying to get the small little pearls of wisdom from them instead of making the mistakes and going back and learning from them. That just drags things out. And partly that was the reason I felt that my meta-analysis took 2 years to carry out.
The worst bits of a systematic review, I think probably the hardest thing about systematic review is how long it takes to do. They are quite time consuming, and they're great because you don't need to be in an academic post to do a systematic review. You can fit them around your clinical duties, but they do take time, particularly if you're doing them around clinical duties. And in my experience, it takes up to 2 years from beginning to end, with that end point being publication.